Arya Targaryen, the daughter of Aegon the Uncrowned and his sister Rhaena, was 11 years of age, and had been heir to the Iron Throne for as long as she could remember but for the 3 days that separated Prince Aegon's birth from his death. A strong-willed, bold-tongued, fiery young girl, Arya delighted in the attention that came with being a queen-in-waiting, and was not pleased to find herself displaced by the newborn princess. Her mother, Queen Rhaena, likely shared these feelings, but she held her tongue and spoke no word of it even to her closest confidants. She had trouble enough in her own hall at the time, for a rift had opened between her and her beloved Alyssa Farman. Denied any part of the incomes of Fair Isle by her brother Lord Franklin, Alyssa asked the Dowager Queen for gold sufficient to build a new ship in the shipyards of Driftmark, a large, swift vessel meant to sail the Sunset Sea. Rhaena denied her request. "I could not bear for you to leave me," she said, but Lady Alyssa heard only, "No." With the hindsight of history to guide us, we can look back and see that all the portents were there, ominous signs of difficult days ahead, but even the archmaesters of the conclave saw none of that as they reflected on the year about to end. Not one of them realized that the year ahead would be amongst the darkest in the long reign of Jaehaerys I Targaryen, a year so marked by death, division, and disaster that the maesters and smallfolk alike would come to call it the Year of the Stranger. The first death of 54 AC came within days of the celebrations that marked the coming of the new year, as Septon Oswyck passed in his sleep. He was an old man and had been failing for some time, but his passing cast a pall over the court all the same. At a time when the Queen Regent, the King's Hand, and the Faith had all opposed the marriage of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, Oswyck had agreed to perform the rites for them, and his courage had not been forgotten. At the king's request, his remains were interred on Dragonstone, where he had served so long and so faithfully. The Red Keep was still in mourning when the next blow fell, though at the time it seemed an occasion for joy. A raven from Storm's End delivered an astonishing message. Queen Alyssa was once again with child, at the age of 46. A second miracle, Grand Maester Bennifer proclaimed when he told the king the news. Septon Barth, who had taken on Oswyck's duties after his death, was more doubtful. Her Grace had never completely recovered from the birth of her son Boromund, he cautioned. He questioned whether she still had strength enough to carry a child to term. Rhaegar Baratheon was elated at the prospect of another son, however, and foresaw no difficulties. His wife had given birth to 7 children, he insisted. Why not an 8th? On Dragonstone, problems of another sort were coming to a head. Lady Alyssa Farman could suffer life upon the island no more. She had heard the sea calling. She told Queen Rhaena, it was time for her to take her leave. Never one to make a show of her emotions, the Queen in the East received the news stone-faced. "I have asked you to stay," she said. "I will not beg. If you would go, go." Princess Arya had none of her mother's restraint. When Lady Alyssa came to say her farewells, the princess wept and clung to her leg, pleading with her to stay, or failing that, to take her along. "I want to be with you," Arya said. "I want to sail the seas and have adventures." Lady Alyssa shed a tear as well, we are told, but she pushed the princess away gently and told her, "No, child. Your place is here." Alyssa Farman departed for Driftmark the next morning. From there she took ship across the narrow sea to Pentos. Thereafter she made her way overland to Braavos, whose shipwrights were far famed, but Rhaena Targaryen and Princess Arya had no notion of her final destination. The queen believed she had gone no farther than Driftmark. Lady Alyssa had good reason for wanting more distance between her and the queen, however. A fortnight after her departure, Sir Merrill Bullock, still commander of the castle garrison, brought 3 terrified grooms and the keeper of the dragon yard into Rhaena's presence. 3 dragon eggs were missing, and days of searching had not turned them up. After questioning every man who had access to the dragons closely, Sir Merrill was convinced that Lady Alyssa had made off with them. If this betrayal by one she had loved wounded Rhaena Targaryen, she hid it well, but there was no hiding her fury. She commanded Sir Merrill to question the grooms and stableboys more sharply. When the questioning proved fruitless, she relieved him of his command and expelled him from Dragonstone, together with his son Sir Alan, and a dozen other men she found suspicious. She even went so far as to summon her husband, Andro Farman, demanding to know if he had been complicit in his sister's crime. His denials only goaded her to more rage, until their shouts could be heard echoing through the halls of Dragonstone. She sent men to Driftmark, only to learn that Lady Alyssa had sailed to Pentos. She sent men to Pentos, but there the trail went cold. Only then did Rhaena Targaryen mount Dreamfire to fly to the Red Keep and inform her brother of what had transpired. Alyssa had no love for dragons, she told the king. It was gold she wanted, gold to build a ship. She will sell the eggs. They are worth a fleet of ships. Jaehaerys had received his sister in his solar, with only Grand Maester Benefer present to bear witness to what was said. If those eggs should hatch, there will be another Dragonlord in the world, one not of our own house. They may not hatch, Benefer said. Not away from Dragonstone. The heat, it is known, some dragon eggs simply turn to stone. Then some spicemonger in Pentos will find himself possessed of 3 very costly stones, Jaehaerys said. Elsewise. The birth of 3 young dragons is not a thing that can easily be kept secret. Whoever has them will want to crow. We must have eyes and ears in Pentos, Tyrosh, Myr, all the free cities. Offer rewards for any word of dragons. What do you mean to do? His sister Rhaena asked him. What I must. What you must. Do not think to wash your hands of this, sweet sister. You wanted Dragonstone and I gave it to you, and you brought this woman there. This thief. The long reign of Jaehaerys I Targaryen was a peaceful one, for the most part, such wars as he fought were few and short. Let no man mistake Jaehaerys for his father, Aenys, however. There was nothing weak about him, nothing indecisive, as his sister Rhaena and Grandmaester Benefer witnessed then, when the king went on to say, should the dragons turn up, anywhere from here to Yt, we will demand their return. They were stolen from us, they are ours by right. If that demand should be denied, then we must needs go and get them. Take them back if we can, kill them if not. No hatchlings can hope to stand against Vermithor and Dreamfire. And Silverwing? Asked Rhaena. Our sister had no part in this. I will not put her at risk. The queen in the east smiled then. She is Rhaenys, and I am Visenya. I have never thought otherwise. Grand Maester Benefer said, you are speaking of waging war across the narrow sea, your grace. The costs must needs be borne. I will not allow Valyria to rise again. Imagine what the Triarchs of Volantis would do with dragons. Let us pray it never comes to that. With that his grace ended the audience, cautioning the others not to speak of the missing eggs. No one must know of this but we 3. It was too late for such cautions, though. On Dragonstone, the theft was common knowledge, even amongst the fisherfolk. And fisherfolk, as is known, sail to other islands, and thus the whispers spread. Benefer, acting through the Pentoshi Master of Coin, who had agents in every port, reached out across the narrow sea as the king had commanded, paying good coin to bad men, in the words of Rego Draz for any news of dragon eggs, dragons, or Alyssa Farman. A small host of whisperers, informers, courtiers, and courtesans produced hundreds of reports, a score of which proved to be of value to the Iron Throne for other reasons. But every rumor of the dragon eggs proved worthless. We know now that Lady Alyssa made her way to Bravos after Pentos, though not before taking on a new name. Having been driven from Fair Isle and disowned by her brother Lord Franklin, she took on a bastard name of her own devising, calling herself Alice Westhill. Under that name, she secured an audience with the Sealord of Bravos. The Sealord's menagerie was far famed, and he was glad to buy the dragon eggs. The gold she received in return she entrusted to the Iron Bank, and used it to finance the building of the Sun Chaser, the ship she had dreamed of for many a year. None of this was known on Westeros at the time, however, and soon enough King Jaehaerys had a fresh concern. In the starry sept of Aldtown, the High Septon had collapsed whilst ascending a flight of steps to his bedchamber. He was dead before he reached the bottom. All across the realm, bells in every sept sang a dolorous song. The father of the faithful had gone to join the Seven. The king had no time for prayer or grieving, though. As soon as his holiness was interred, the most devout would be assembling in the starry sept to choose his successor, and Jaehaerys knew that the peace of the realm depended on the new man continuing the policies of his predecessor. The king had his own candidate for the Crystal Crown, Septon Barth, who had come to oversee the Red Keep's library, only to become one of his most trusted advisors. It took half the night for Barth himself to persuade his grace of the folly of his choice. He was too young, too little known, too unorthodox in his opinions, not even one of the most devout. He had no hope of being chosen. They would need another candidate, one more acceptable to his brothers of the faith. The king and the lords of the council were agreed on one thing, however, they must needs do all they could to make certain that Septon Matthias was not chosen. His tenure in King's Landing had left a legacy of mistrust behind it, and Jaehaerys could neither forgive nor forget his words at the gates of Dragonstone. Regodraz suggested that some well-placed bribes might produce the desired result. Spread enough gold amongst these most devout and they will choose me, he japed, though I would not want the job. Demon Valerion and Karl Corbray advocated a show of force, though Lord Demon wished to send his fleet, whilst Lord Karl offered to lead an army. Albin Massey, the bent-backed master of laws, wondered if Septon Matthias might suffer the same fate as the High Septon who had made such trouble for Aenys and Maegor, a sudden, mysterious death. Septon Barth, Grand Maester Benefer, and Queen Alysanne were horrified by all these proposals, and the king rejected them out of hand. He and the queen would go to Aldtown at once, he decided instead. His High Holiness had been a leal servant to the gods and a staunch friend to the Iron Throne. It was only right that they be there to see him laid to rest. The only way to reach Aldtown in time was by dragon. All the lords of the council, even Septon Barth, were made uneasy by the thought of the king and queen alone in Aldtown. There are still those amongst my brothers who do not love your grace, Barth pointed out. Lord Demon agreed, and reminded Jaehaerys of what had befallen the queen at Maidenpool. When the king insisted that he would have the protection of the Hightower, uneasy glances were exchanged. Lord Donal is a schemer and a sulker, said Manfred Redwyn. I do not trust him. Nor should you. He does what he thinks best for himself, his house, and Aldtown, and cares not a fig for anyone or anything else. Not even for his king. Then I must convince him that what is best for his king is what is best for himself, his house, and Aldtown, said Jaehaerys. I believe I can do that. So he ended the discussion and gave orders for their dragons to be brought forth. Even for a dragon, the flight from King's Landing to Aldtown is a long one. The king and queen stopped twice along the way, once at Bitterbridge and once at Highgarden, resting overnight and taking counsel with their lords. The lords of the council had insisted that they take some protection at the very least. Sir Joffrey Doggett flew with Alysanne, and the Scarlet Shadow, Jonquil Dark, with Jaehaerys, so as to balance the weight each dragon carried. The unexpected arrival of Vermithor and Silverwing at Aldtown brought thousands to the streets to point and stare. No word of their coming had been sent ahead, and there were many in the city who were frightened, wondering what this might portend. None, mayhaps, more than Septon Matthias, who turned pale when he was told. Jaehaerys brought down Vermithor on the wide marble plaza outside the Starry Sept, but it was his queen who made the city gasp when Silverwing alighted atop the Hightower itself, the beating of her wings fanning the flames of its famous beacon. Though the High Septon's funeral rites were the purported reason for their visit, His High Holiness had already been interred in the crypts beneath the Starry Sept by the time the king and queen arrived. Jaehaerys gave a eulogy nonetheless, addressing a huge crowd of Septons, maesters, and smallfolk in the plaza. At the end of his remarks, he announced that he and the queen would remain in Aldtown until the new High Septon had been chosen, so we might ask for his blessing. As Archmaester Goodwin wrote afterward, the smallfolk cheered, the maesters nodded sagely, and the Septons looked at one another and thought on dragons. During their time in Aldtown, Jaehaerys and Alysanne slept in Lord Donal's own apartments at the top of the Hightower, with all of Aldtown spread out below. We have no certain knowledge of what words passed between them and their host, for their discussions took place behind closed doors without even a maester present. Years later, however, King Jaehaerys told Septon Barth all that occurred, and Barth set down a summary for the sake of history. The Hightowers of Aldtown were an ancient family, powerful, wealthy, proud, and large. It had long been their custom for the younger sons, brothers, cousins, and bastards of the house to join the faith, where many had risen high over the centuries. Lord Donal Hightower had a younger brother, 2 nephews, and 6 cousins serving the 7 in 54 AC. The brother, 1 nephew, and 2 cousins wore the cloth of silver of the most devout. It was Lord Donal's desire that one of them become High Septon. King Jaehaerys did not care which house His High Holiness derived from, or whether he was of low or noble birth. His only concern was that the new High Septon be an exceptionalist. The Targaryen tradition of sibling marriage must never again be questioned by the Starry Sept. He wanted the new father of the faithful to make exceptionalism an official doctrine of the faith. And though His Grace had no objection to Lord Donal's brother, nor the rest of his ilk, none of them had yet spoken on the issue, so, after hours of discussion, an understanding was reached, and sealed with a great feast wherein Lord Donal praised the wisdom of the king.
whilst making him acquainted with his brothers, uncles, nephews, nieces, and cousins. Across the city at the Starry Sept, the most devout convened to choose their new shepherd, with agents of Lord Hightower and the king amongst them. Unbeknownst to most, 4 ballots were required. Septon Matthias led on the first, as anticipated, but lacked the votes necessary to secure the Crystal Crown. Thereafter his numbers dwindled on every ballot, whilst other men rose up.